Hi, this is Father Joe Cisetti with you once again. We're going through difficult times, and I'd like to share with you some books that I think might be helpful as we go through difficult times, as we navigate challenging waters. First one, of course, is going to be the Bible. We've talked about that and all. But in addition to the Bible, there's some works I'd like to share with you. One is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis was a 20th century Christian writer in England. He wrote a number of works. The Chronicles of Narnia is probably one of his most famous books. This one, The Screwtape Letters, is rather intriguing. It's written by a senior demon to a junior demon about how to trip up the victim and try to get the victim away from the enemy. Now, in this, everything's kind of in reverse. It's like looking at a negative because the victim is the soul that the demon is after, and the enemy is God. So it's kind of, you have to count almost as you're going through it. Remember, it's like looking at a negative. You're looking at things in reverse. It's kind of a sobering work, but very good. Reminds us the importance of being aware of temptation in our life and how the evil one can work. This is part of the advice that the senior demon gives to the junior one. Indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope, soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. So we all deal with temptation, really in one way or another, I suppose, every day, but sometimes challenging times, those temptations can get to be even harder. Louis Malle was a French filmmaker, and he had a film in 1987 called Au revoir les enfants, Goodbye Children. It told the story of one of his teachers, Père Jacques de Jésus. Father Jacques, Père Jacques, ran a boys' boarding school, and this is during World War II, during the German occupation of France. And he hid three Jewish boys in the school. And one day the Gestapo came, the boys were arrested, the school was shut down. Père Jacques was also sent to a labor camp. And even in that labor camp, he worked hard to minister to others. There were Polish prisoners there. He tried to learn Polish so he could minister to them. He even ministered to prisoners who were atheists, prisoners who were communists. And he survived his time in that camp, but just barely. He was too far gone, and he died about 10 days after the liberation of the camp. His cause for canonization has been introduced. I think that's in process. And this book is called Père Jacques, Resplendent in Victory. Tells the story of his life, a very, very interesting life. And this is put out by the Institute of Carmelite Studies. I'm not sure if it's available for a download or not, but if you go to Institute of Carmelite Studies, I've never gotten a bad book from them. They have some very fine books. So difficult times, this reminds us of the importance of courage. It reminds us of the importance of prayer, because as a Carmelite, prayer would have been something very, very important to him. Joseph Cardinal Bernardin was the Archbishop of Chicago from 1982 until his death in 1996. And he wrote a book, they'd finished really a few days or so before his death, called The Gift of Peace. And it recounts some of his life, but it's really about the last 3 years of his life when he had been falsely accused of sexually abusing someone, and his accuser eventually recanted, and he then went and personally met with this man who had accused him and offered him forgiveness. And then about his first round of dealing with cancer, he was declared cancer-free, but it came back. And they said this came out, he finished this shortly before his death in November of 1996. The book is called The Gift of Peace. We had a St. Therese book club for a while years ago, and this was one of the books we looked at. And so I said, primarily it's about the last 3 years of his life, but although he talks about his life in other ways as well. Not a hard read, but it's a different type of courage. He very much believed in the importance of prayer and the importance of peace, even in the midst of these struggles that he was going through. Francis Xavier Nguyen Van Tuan was a Vietnamese bishop. Shortly after the fall of Saigon in 1975, he was arrested. He was imprisoned for the following 13 years. I think it might have been about 9 of those years. He was in solitary confinement, where he was led pretty much to almost the brink of sanity. But somehow he survived with the grace of God. And eventually he was released on the condition that he could never return to Vietnam. He came to Rome. In the year 2000, Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, asked him to preach the annual Lenten retreat to the Pope and his household, the household to the Curia, the people who work there in Rome. And so this was for the new millennium. It's called Testimony of Hope. And Francis Xavier Nguyen Van Tuan talks about the importance of hope. So this retreat that he gave, and if you gave a retreat to the Pope, you're going to work really hard at it. So it's a very fine book, a very rich book, and this is someone who really knew what it meant to suffer, for the faith, and who yet still held on to the value of hope. St. John Paul II named him a cardinal, and eventually, his cause has been introduced for canonization as well. So these are some books just for, again, these challenging times, whether it regards temptation, or courage, or prayer, or hope, or perseverance. We find these. Now, there's some fiction works that can be helpful as well. One of them, I don't have a hard copy with me. I've read it twice. A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. So Charles Dickens was a British writer from the 19th century. A Tale of Two Cities is about the French Revolution. And what you see in that is an illustration of just how bad people can be and how good people can be, and how evil and how courageous people can be. It's a very famous work, well worth the read. And again, during difficult times, obviously not quite like that, but still very much worth the read. If you want to get a little more literary and go back a little bit further, 2 or 3 centuries, King Lear by Shakespeare is a very, very fine work. And again, you see this, how evil some people can be and how good some people can be. Even when people treat them poorly, they continue to be good to them and to be kind to them, and not in a dysfunctional way, but in a very genuine, loving way, and even about conversion here as well. So Shakespeare isn't going to be the easiest of reading, but it's very good. I tell people I knew I was starting to get old when I started to read Shakespeare because I wanted to and not because I had to. At any rate, some good reading during times like this, whether it be spiritual reading, whether it be good fiction, is something that can inspire us, that can lift our spirits, and hopefully will lead us to pray more and more for each other and for our troubled world. And in the meantime, in the words of St. Paul, we seek to rejoice in hope, to endure in affliction, and to persevere in prayer. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope you find this helpful. God bless you all.